Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we are continuing our 3 Bolens Ride-a-matics project, and today specifically we will be working on the orange 1962. We've had a bit of a move around here, got this tractor on the bench kind of facing the direction we need it in, and we've put the other 2 tractors over there by the door, ready to use for reference. Now today we're going to be working on the kind of Versamatic system and then moving back to the gearbox. Now we have talked about this before, but we've got a number of parts to help us with this. We've got a new drive chain, we've got one of these sheave pulleys, we have the bottom drive pulley with the sprocket on it, and we've got the deck pulleys with the shaft that goes through the chassis that this also goes onto. Now we got all of these parts from America, so thank you Kevin for these parts, and we're going to be putting them to use today. Now this sheave pulley doesn't have any bearings in it, which we knew when we bought it, so we bought a couple of these which we'll be installing in there today. But before we start installing all of these parts, we're going to take apart what is already on the tractor, which is kind of this pivot mechanism for the Versamatic, and we're going to disconnect it at the clevis fork and the spring. We think the adjustment when it comes to the clevis fork is wrong. It looks like there's too much thread sticking out the other side, and to kind of confirm our suspicions, we looked at the other Rideamatics that we've got in here, and that also suggested that we kind of need to wind that out a bit more. Now for us to do that we'd have to disconnect it anyway, so we thought while we're doing that we might as well take it all apart and clean it, which hopefully with the starter generator there that shouldn't get too much in the way, but we'll have to see about that one. I don't think we've actually covered how to kind of change the belts on one of these Rideamatics before, but it is the process that I'm now about to do to disconnect all of this stuff, which is that you have to release the tension on this spring here, which usually if there's belts on here there'll be plenty of tension on that, whereas obviously this has nothing connected, so there's no tension, which makes it a bit more difficult. So I've got a screwdriver through the loop of the turnbuckle to stop it turning too much, and there's effectively a nut on this end which I'm going to wind out, and this should loosen that off, and then once that's fully loosened off we can take out this split pin and the whole thing should come apart. We have disconnected the 2 points we were talking about now, being the clevis fork and the turnbuckle, which if you were taking the belts off you would just loosen that turnbuckle, but we've taken it off completely this time. Now some of this stuff is still filthy because we couldn't really get to it with the pressure washer previously, and that hole in there is meant to be circular. It's quite clearly not now from the wear, which we're not going to fix now, but it's something to keep in mind when it comes to doing a full restoration on one of these tractors, that we're going to have to make up a new one of these parts, which shouldn't be too difficult because we've had to do a similar thing before for these Bolens HT deck lift brackets, which is a similar concept. These are just a plate and then kind of a bit of threaded rod or a bolt, whereas these are a plate with a partially threaded bolt through there with the head cut off, kind of welded into the center of this plate. Should be easily replicatable, so I'll pop that down there. Now with this disconnected I can kind of lay this back here, and I'm going to try and keep the turnbuckle and the spring together, so I'll just unhook that from there, There's another part separated. And now we can get to taking these pins out. Now, in the end, we've actually decided against taking those pins out. We did have a go at tapping this one out, which we think that's just kind of pressed in there and should come out, but it isn't coming out easily, and we don't want to cause any damage to the end of that pin. Now, the other one, we took the nut and spring washer off of this side, and we believe the other end of this pin is threaded into this bracket here. We get this assumption from the parts manual, which if we go over to the laptop here, you can kind of see this is the bottom pin, and it very much looks like there's a thread on there, and the end bit it can thread into is that bracket on there. So that isn't moving easily either at the moment. We can't really work out how we would get that off, except for maybe putting a couple of half nuts on there and trying to turn it, but we don't have those at the moment. So those are going to have to stay where they are for now, and we've kind of cleaned up around them. There was tons of grease and stuff on there, which is all gone now, and we've cleaned up this original grease nipple as well, and that appears to work, but we'll put some grease in that in a minute just to make sure. We've also put a tap through the thread here where there was a grease nipple missing, and we've got a new one to put on here for that, but it has a washer on it, as you can see there, because the threads are slightly different on our replacement ones. So when we wound it in a second ago just to see what angle it would sit at, it was completely the wrong direction. So that's on there just to kind of space it out a bit. Not sure if that will kind of close up to that as it should do, but we'll see. We also put an airline through this grease nipple to clear out all of the old grease out of here, but we forgot to put a tissue in front of here, so everything kind of this direction got coated in grease. But now just need to thread this on, and then we can get the grease gun out. These two grease points can be done, and we'll probably put some in this one just to make sure that grease is kind of getting through the whole thing. Obviously we'll grease that one up properly when it comes to putting the pulley on there, but that is that on there now. So we'll just go and get the grease gun and grease those points up. We've greased everything up now, and we did actually have to replace that grease nipple with a straight one because it was kind of leaking out the side. There wasn't a good seal around it, so we might need to look into getting some different angled grease nipples, but we looked on our other Rideamatics and we think we can make that work. Now it's time to kind of reassemble all of the linkage parts that we took off. So first I'll just attach the spring to here, like so. I'll just lay that there for the minute. That's obviously got to go through that hole, and then have this nut on the other side, which we have cleaned up a tiny bit since we took it off. Next, this linkage has to go on here, and that kind of goes onto there. Have to make that line up with this part, and also make it line up with this as well. So that's quite a few things to kind of line up to reassemble all of this. So what we're going to do is cut now, and we'll come back to you in a minute once both me and my cameraman have lined all of this stuff up, because I think it might be a two-person job. As you can see, we've connected up all of the linkage stuff again. We did actually leave the turnbuckle slightly loose because we know that's going to need tightening up and adjusting later once we get all of the pulleys on and get some belts on, which actually reminds us that we need to order a set of belts for this because we weren't too impressed with the ones that we put on the other 62, and then it didn't work, which we're not sure if that was the type of belts we used, but just in case we're going to order our usual type of belts for this tractor. But now we're ready to put some new parts on, the first of which would be this sheave pulley, which we've taken apart and cleaned up. It's actually quite easy to take apart. Both ends of this kind of center tube part are threaded, so we just unthreaded those and took the sliding part off, cleaned up all of the contact faces so they are or they're free of the corrosion and stuff that they did have on them, so that's good. As we said before though, these need bearings put in them. So we've got the press out, got one of the bearings on one of our press tools that we've used before. So I'll just kind of line this up in the press now. bring the press down to it and we can push it in. There we are. I'll just let this up and you can see. Take the press tool out. That looks good in there. Now we just need to turn this over and do the other side. We have both bearings pressed into this now, and we did just check with a screwdriver to make sure the needles are still going around as they should do, which they are, and we've just lightly oiled the shaft on there. So hope this go on nice and easily. There we are. And now we've just got to put a couple of washers on here. And because we don't have an old style lock nut, we're going to have to use a nylock, which is still pretty much just as effective, but not kind of original. Why isn't that going on? There we are. But not kind of how it would be originally, but it's the best we can do really, seeing as all of this was not on there when we got this tractor. And that's done up now. Moving on to the bottom pulley now, which is this pulley here. There's a couple of washers for each side which are quite worn, but seeing as we're not using a deck on this tractor at this moment, that doesn't really matter. And that is attached to the sprocket that has the drive chain going to the gearbox. That has a washer on either side, as you can see. That's the other one. Kind of left that as it should be. Then going through here is this shaft, which is actually independent from this pulley, and this pulley on this side takes a belt from the engine as the PTO. This one goes on the other side and then drives an underbelly deck. So in future we can install one of those on here. However, something we noticed is that there appears to be the remains of a grease nipple snapped off in this end of the shaft, which is unhelpful. However, we're going to try and take it out with an easy out, which these things usually aren't easy and don't get the thing that you're trying to get out. But we'll give it a try. I'll just kind of try and get this started, and then I can get some sort of lever or wrench to pull it out, I was going to say, but somehow that was actually loose in there. I think that's the first time something's ever come out that easily with an easy out. So there we are. That's all that was left of that grease nipple. Clearly it wasn't threaded in very far. That's kind of caught us off guard. We were expecting that to be much more difficult, so we'll just quickly run a tap through this thread and come back to you. We've cleaned that thread out now, so we are happy with that, and I'll kind of assemble all the things that should be going on this side of this shaft. So I'll just put that washer on there. The pulley, I've tested the needle bearings in this pulley, so they're all good. Then that washer on there. This is all the stuff that goes in from this side of the tractor. Now we've taken the deck mounting bracket off, which was a 2-second job, but we kind of needed it off so that this can go in here. Again, I've tested those needle bearings that were through the chassis, and they're fine. See if this, there we are. That's that PTO lever out of the way. Oh, there we are. That is that pulley fully installed now. And we do have the other bits for the other side on the bench here, which is the deck pulley there that goes on the other side. But before that, you put a washer on. And we've got a new Woodruff key to put on there as well, and a new grease nipple. We have the new Woodruff key on the shaft now, and we've also put the new grease nipple on there too. The Woodruff key took a bit of fettling to kind of get it to go in, but it's on there now. And next is to put the pulley on. And there we are. It's best done with someone holding the other side, but can't especially do that. The last bit's probably going to need a bit of tapping, so I think we'll cut here and come back to you in a second with this hopefully in the right position. We have the other pulley fully fitted up now, and that is all good on there. We've also greased it up as well, and that's taken grease all the way through, so very happy with that. Now we did move on to our chain. This is the one we got with our lot of parts, and we were just kind of test fitting it. Fitted perfectly around the two sprockets back here, the gearbox one and the kind of tensioner part. However, didn't fit so well on this front sprocket, which kind of confused us a bit. So we wanted to check if this is actually the right chain for this tractor. So we got out our original chain from our 1960 Rideamatic and compared it with this, and they looked pretty much identical, which a 1960 chain isn't the same as a 62 chain, which we can show you if we take this over to our gold 1962, put that next to it. Don't even need a tape measure to show you that that's a lot chunkier, is the 62 chain. So what we need to do now is order one of those for this tractor. Not a big problem, we'll just take one off. We'll take it off the 61 Rideamatic there, seeing as the other two 62s here are operational now, so that's good. But we'll have to order one of those and kind of measure from the 61, which will take a bit of time, so clearly we can't do any more on that today. However, I would just like to show you something that we've kind of noticed. We've been fiddling around with the gearbox, which in a previous video we did kind of show that when you put it into a forward gear, the gearbox kind of locks. But having fiddled around with it a bit, sometimes it still does that, but if you kind of turn the gearbox as you put it into a gear, there you go, that's worked that time. You can see that actually goes into a forwards gear and drives it. Now we've managed to do this for high and low, and reverse has worked all the time. So clearly there's some sort of muck in the gearbox that is kind of jamming it up, gumming it up and stopping it from working consistently. So the gearbox oil level we checked, and there really isn't much in there, and we're not too impressed with the stuff that is in there. So what we're planning on doing is draining the gearbox oil, or what's left of it, and completely flushing the gearbox, and then after that we'll put all new oil in it and make sure that's up to the level, and then see if that's kind of cured the inconsistencies with the gearbox jamming up a bit. Now that's going to take quite a while, and there's not much in that job that we can video. So for today we're going to say we'll do that off camera, and our work today on video is done. So that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.